Radio is an intimate storytelling medium, and when it bonds with one of the finest storytellers of our times, the result is sheer magic. During these times of social distancing, All India Radio hopes to bring you some comfort, some connection, with an exclusive story reading series, Bonding over the Radio. Coming up is the pick of the day, voiced by the author Ruskin Bond himself.
Sir, you had promised some of my young listeners a story about Jim Corbett's Khansama.
Well, the book is called Tigers for Dinner, and the subtitle is Tall Tales by Jim Corbett's Khansama. And so they're actually a series of episodes or stories as told to me by Khansama when I was a small boy of 5 or 6. And he was, of course, given to some exaggeration. So I think one must take them with a pinch of salt. So there's also a good deal of food in these stories too, since as a small boy I was always interested in what he was cooking. Should I read a little introduction and then go on with the story?
Yes, please, sir.
Tigers for Dinner. Did Mahmood really exist? And did he really have these adventures? These are questions I am often asked. When I was a small boy, we did have a cook called Mahmood, and among his testimonials was one from the great Jim Corbett, praising Mahmood's culinary skills. We had no reason to doubt it was genuine. As to the tales themselves, well, like all good storytellers, Mahmood was given to a little exaggeration, so we must allow him some poetic license. Jungle Cook, that's the first chapter in this book. My favorite stories as a child? Well, it would be hard to beat the tales, short or tall, that I heard from Mahmood, who was our Khansama when I was 5 or 6 years old. My parents didn't tell me many stories. Mum was busy with her parties and Dad with his stamp collection. That is, when he wasn't in his office. I had the house and the grounds to myself. But there was no one to talk to, except the flowers. The cosmos were good listeners. They nodded politely when I spoke to them. The roses looked away, and they were very snobbish. And the marigolds were friendly enough, provided I didn't pick them. So I would wander into the kitchen to see what Mahmood was making for lunch, and to taste the kofta curry or the pilau rice, just to make sure the taste was right. Since then, I've been a curry taster all my life. Mahmood was a good cook, and in many ways my best friend, there being no children on the premises. But he was also a great storyteller. You see, before coming to us, he'd worked for Jim Corbett, the great shikari, who'd shot a great number of man-eating tigers, apart from other dangerous denizens of the jungle. Did you see him shoot a tiger? I asked. Oh, many times, said Mahmood. A tiger a week, that was nothing to Carpet Saab. Did the tigers come to the house, or did you go looking for them? Carpet Saab went after them. Most of the time we were in the camps and I had to do my cooking in the open. Not an easy job, being a jungle cook. Usually the salt was missing and everyone would complain. My mother says you put too much salt in the food. Oh, that's so I don't forget it. Better a salty dish than a tasteless one. Don't you agree, Baba? And too many chilies, I added. A chili a day keeps the doctor away. That's what my grandfather used to say, and he was an Unani, a doctor of natural medicine from the old Persian system. A little masala a little turmeric, and you won't need a medic. Grandfather, wise man, he taught me to read and write in Urdu, but I never went to school. Had to earn a living from a very young age. So I learnt to cook. It's not a bad way of making a living. You're not a bad cook, Mahmood. So tell your parents to increase my salary. Then be careful with the salt. You're a salty boy and saucy. Try one of these koftas. I knew you'd come, so I made an extra kofta. Thank you, Mahmood. But tell me about Corbett and tigers. Did you see a tiger? Of course I did. There were tigers all over the place. Bang, bang, bang. Carpet Saab kept firing, and the tigers kept falling. Man-eaters, cattle-eaters, child-eaters. One of them took my masalchi when we were in camp. Took him from the tent we were sharing. Dragged him out by his feet and carried him away while he screamed. That tiger was too fast for Carpet Saab. By the time the camp aroused, both tiger and masalchi had vanished. We found his bones in the morning. What's a masalchi? I asked. The boy who helped me. He helped me prepare the meat and vegetables and washed all the dishes afterwards. He was a big loss. For 2 weeks I had to manage everything on my own. We couldn't get another masalchi. No applications. And I had to sleep alone for the rest of the time we were in camp. Carpet Saab told me to keep a fire burning outside my tent. Tigers stay away from fire. They don't like getting burnt. And did it stay away? No, the brute came again. Stuck its head in at the tent opening, looking for another juicy masalchi. But I was ready for it. I had just been frying some eggs, and my frying pan was as hot as hellfire. And with it, I struck the tiger on its nose. You're a brave man, Mahmood. What did the tiger do? It didn't like it. You see, tigers have very sensitive noses. That's why they have such a strong sense of smell. Their noses lead them to their prey. But a burnt nose can be very painful, especially for a tiger. And I'd singed its whiskers too. Tigers don't like losing their whiskers. They're just like army generals. So what happened? It let out a roar, leapt into the air, fell backwards into the fire, let out another roar, and fled into the jungle. For an hour or more, we could hear it roaring with agony. You were very brave, Mahmood. What did everyone say when you told them what you had done? They didn't believe me, Baba. They said I was making it all up, that the tiger had taken off after burning its paw in the fire. I showed Carpet Saab the tiger's whiskers stuck to the bottom of my frying pan, but he only laughed and said I could serve tigers for dinner. But you were a hero, Mahmood. Yes, Baba, I'm glad you think so. Have another kofta. The following day, Mahmood was making lamb chops. I liked lamb chops. Mahmood knew I liked them, and he had an extra chop ready for me, just in case I felt like a pre-lunch snack. What was Jim Corbett's favorite dish? I asked, while dealing with the succulent chop. Oh, he liked roast duck. Used to shoot them as they flew up from the jail. What's a jail, Mahmood? A shallow sort of lake in places you could walk about in the water. Different types of birds would come there in the winter, ducks and geese, and all kinds of buglers, herons you call them. And it was full of muggers, those long-nosed crocodiles. They'll snap you off if you come within their range. Nasty creatures, those muggermuch. One of them really got me. How did that happen, Mahmood? Oh, Baba, just the memory of it makes me shudder. I'd given everyone their dinner and retired to my tent. It was a hot night and we couldn't sleep. Swarms of mosquitoes rose from the jail, invaded the tent and attacked me on the face and arms and feet. I dragged my camp cot outside the tent, hoping the breeze would keep the mosquitoes away. After some time they moved on, and I fell asleep, wrapped up in my bedsheet. Towards dawn I felt my cot quivering, shaking. Was it an earthquake? But no one else was awake. And then the cot started moving. I sat up, looked about me. The cot was moving steadily forward in the direction of the water. And beneath it, holding us up, was a beastly crocodile, a magarmach. It gave me the fright of my life, Baba. A magarmach beneath my bed, and I upon it. I cried out for help. Carpet Sahib woke up, rushed out of his tent, his gun in his hands. But it was still dark, and all he could see was my bed moving rapidly towards the jail. Just before we struck the water, I leapt from the cot and ran up the bank, calling for help. Carpet Sahib saw me then. He ran down the slope, firing at the moving cot. I don't know if he hit the horrible creature, but there was a big splash, and it disappeared into the jail. And did you recover the cot? No, it floated away and then sank. We did not go after it. And what did Corbett say afterwards? He said I had shown great presence of mind. He said he'd never seen anyone make such a leap for safety. You were a hero, Mahmood. Thank you, Baba. There's time for another chop if you're hungry.
A question just occurred to me. Were you ever groomed for reading on radio?
No, not really. I remember even when I lived in Delhi back in the early 60s, 1960s, I used to go over to the All India Radio and do the odd talk. Usually it was about animals. I don't think they appreciated ghost stories in those days. They were usually little 15-minute talks on animals. Mm-hmm. But I read them in my normal voice. But before that, when I was in London, I did give also 2 or 3 radio talks. Those, of course, were radio days. There were no television then. So everything was radio, and I grew up on radio, so I was used to listening to classics being read out. You know, they sometimes on BBC, sometimes All India Radio. So I was a radio person, you might say, in many ways, listening as a listener. Mm-hmm. And listening, you perhaps start, in a way, being influenced by the sort of readers or who you listen to on a regular basis, and try to talk like them. So in a way, you teach yourself
yes.
in some ways,
True,
just by listening.
It came as a pleasant surprise to me to know you had read for All India Radio long years ago.
And then you came once and interviewed me up here.
Yeah, at your house, Ivy Cottage.
That's right.
So I hope the link with radio continues and we come back tomorrow for more stories.
I'll find something entertaining.
That was storyteller par excellence, Ruskin Bond, reading his hand-picked story of the day in our exclusive series, Bonding Over the Radio. A presentation of the Central English Features Unit. This came to you from the External Services Division of All India Radio.